Report story by M_Dela Cruz. Summary. A new, highly contagious and uncontrollable plague has hit Japan and is raving the populace. This new illness causes the sufferers to cough up flowers when thoughts of their romantic interest pop into their mind. How will this affect Izuku and those closest to him? Equals 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 dot. Chapter 1. In full bloom. Irritated. That was the only word that could describe Katsuki at this moment. Here he was, trapped with Kirishima, Ishido, Kyoka, and Deku. Okay, he wasn't really trapped. He could have left any time he wanted, but this was his home. No use escaping a get-together that he initiated. Besides, it just sucked to be alone at home right now looking at his former classmates. He could tell he wasn't the only one who felt that. Exhaustion was baked into their faces. While Mina was trying her best to talk with everyone, Bakugo could have sworn that even her horns were drooping. Eijiro was unusually quiet and would stare off into space when he thought no one was looking. Kyoka was chattering away with Mina, though there was a panicked energy in how she spoke. Jiro's eyes would dart about every so often. Bakugo wondered if she was making sure everyone was still there. And don't get him started on Deku. That green-haired shit was always a bloody mess. He had some medical tape on the bridge of his nose and a sling holding up his left arm. Again, the dumb bastard always had a bad habit of breaking himself when fighting. 2 years out and you'd have thought he would have learned. Idiot. So here they were, beat up and acting out of sorts. They'd all been working so hard lately because of an outbreak caused by some jackass kamikaze attack. The news would not shut up about it, nor would they stop prattling on about the number of rising cases. Each day, they got more information, but for each day, the summit to the mountain of corpses got higher. Katsuki had been there to witness the initial outbreak when that damned asshole blew herself up. Looking into her files, he found that she was responsible for a string of murders that looked exactly like this disease, asphyxiation caused by flowers blooming in the victim's lungs. What they were seeing on the ground, after the initial attack, was nothing short of a horror film. Back streets and apartments occupied by the recently deceased, flowers spilling out of their gaping maws. To help alleviate the burden on first responders, hero agencies started picking up calls for reported cases, checking in on people to confirm if they had caught the plague. They had also taken it upon themselves to deliver the news to grieving families, trying to offer support to but then heroes started catching the disease. Katsuki had made damn sure that he and those around him were taking every precaution as they continued their grisly task. Worry gripped at Bakugo as he looked over the group, his gaze falling on a cheery and worn-out moron. Deku had been at ground zero, but despite the proximity, he'd seemingly made it out unscathed. How though? How could someone be so close to an outbreak and come out no worse for wear? With Deku overtaking Endeavor's reign as the hero who resolved the most crimes, all the public interviews meant his exposure level was astronomical. Bakugo eyed Deku, an itch in the back of his mind bugging him that something was off. This wasn't a time to think about that. They were here to get their minds off of everything. He mentally slapped himself and threw out a beer to Kyoka. Where the hell is Ponytail? You two are practically attached at the hip. Mina softly giggled as Jiro's face visibly lit up. She tried sputtering a response, but Kirishima stepped in to save her the trouble. She's out patrolling with Todoroki and a few others. I was invited, but I decided to come over instead. Promoted stories. You'll also like. Much needed love. Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu. 49.3K 756 after Wattpad. had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Son of all for 1766K12.6K. This is a fanfic of extremely op Izuku. I do not own BNHA. Siro Deku Onishots 31.1K 789. Because of circumstances, this book won't be continued unfortunately. Feel free to check out my other stuff. Thank you for understanding. Return of Mokuden discontinued 3.5K 45. This story is officially up for adoption. If anyone is interested, message me or comment on the story. Feelings. Izawa. X-Reader 57K 1.3 KRE posting. This until I edit it. Sorry if it's not good, it's my first time writing a story. You enroll at UA and you have multiple quirks you are really good at using. Why? Hurt cuz I love you to death. Izuocha. Huh. 0.8.6K 141. Class 1A is now Class 2A and is working to be better heroes due to events that had happened before. Deku has gotten strong feelings toward Uraraka during the summer as the hero who sings with a smile. 37.1K 361. Hi. Guys, this is my first story I write on Wattpad. I hope you like it. TCH, like you had a fucking choice. Bakugo rolled his eyes before sinking into his favorite chair. Where are they patrolling, and who else was on that patrol detail? Kirishima. Quote. There was a strange tinge in Deku's voice. A shaking timbre so subtle that none of the others caught it. Too bad for him. Bakugo had been cursed by fate to be bound to the walking disaster for long enough to catch his idiosyncrasies. Iida and Uraraka said they might go with them. I can't remember where they're going. Sorry man. Oh, wasn't it going to be around the Half Prefecture, babe? Mina chimed in. There was an uptick in cases over there, so they wanted to be nearby, ya know, just in case. Right, Kyoka added. Momo seemed a little worried, but she was going to make masks for the team. That'll keep him safe, right? Yeah, hopefully. Hey, I've got to use the bathroom really quick. Deku quickly stood and practically dashed off down the hallway leading to the washroom. Bakugo ignored the other three who whined for him to start the movie. He got up and tossed the remote over to Jiro. You and Yaoyorozu have been round enough times to know how this shit works. Where are you going? The pizzas we ordered should be here any minute, dude, accused Mina. He only scowled at her as he sighed. Just making sure that shithead doesn't mess with my All Might stuff. You know how that fucker gets. Two sides of the same coin. That's what Momo is always telling me. Bakugo shrugged off the jab and stomped after Deku. At the very end of the hallway was the guest bathroom. Approaching the door, light crept under the door. Bakugo pulled out his phone and dialed Deku. The telltale voice of All Might shouting out was muffled between audible retching off to his right. That son of a bitch. I'm gonna kill him. Storming closer to the door through the dark hallway, All Might's booming voice got louder and louder. Ripping open the door, veins popped across Katsuki's forehead. Sprawled out on the floor, heaving air through rattling gulps, Deku shivered before jumping at the sudden intrusion. Ka-chan. You fucking piece of shit. I knew it. I fucking KNE. Bakugo wasn't allowed to finish. Deku started to cough and heaved out in desperate gasps for air. Katsuki growled as he easily lifted the dead weight, dragging the idiot over to the toilet. He lifted the lid and shoved Deku's head into the bowl. Fucking asshole, lemme guess. You didn't even make it to the can before you started spewing. His only answer was more pitiful regurgitation from the moron. Bakugo felt his blood boil. He hadn't been this angry since their time at Ua. His shoulders bunched up to his ears as he clenched his hands into fists. He tried to breathe but found it too difficult to center himself, what with Deku hurling his guts next to him. Soon enough, though, quiet blanketed the room. Kastuki figured that the stupid shit was bawling his eyes out as silently as possible. How does he get to fucking weak? No, fuck that. He picked up Deku and threw him against the empty space on the wall next to the toilet. He held him there, pinned, vice grip on his shoulders. How long? Bakugo demanded, his voice cracking as something hot and wet pricked at the corner of his eyes. Waiting for Deku to collect himself, an audacious false bravado peered back at him. Switching to a frontal grip, a fistful of Deku's shirt stuffed into one hand as he freed the other to reel back for a strike. The suspicion that Bakugo had been harboring for weeks had been vindicated, and now, he couldn't even revel in it. All he felt was a nauseated rage. Deku caught his gaze and darted his eyes away. Looking closer, pale round face now blotched red from his vomiting, tears stained his freckled cheeks, curly green hair clung to his forehead, drenched in sweat, emerald irises that burned against the now pink eyes. He looked small and torn apart, a well-loved and often worn sweater beaten by time. The idea would have made him laugh if not for the golden petals strewn around the room. Before the outbreak, hardly anyone knew what this disease was. Only one of the global population had ever been infected, and of that, fatalities were rarer. This new quark drive strain was much more lethal. Now lost within the petals, all Bakugo could see was his rival in a hospital bed, holding onto his false bravado until his end. I'm okay, Kachan. Promise. Like hell you are. He let go of Deku with a grunt and crossed his arms. Explain. Now. To his dismay, Deku shook his head. There's not enough time. Our friends are waiting for us. I'll explain this to you later tonight or first thing tomorrow. Katsuki weighed his options quickly, foot tapping impatiently as he mulled it over. Fine, he spat out. Clean this shit up, not one fucking petal, got it? It's a deal. Deku answered with more pep in his voice than he should have had, given everything going on. Bakugo flipped him off and walked back to the others who were making a mess in his kitchen. What? Did Midori fall in or something? Mina asked, a mouthful of pizza tucked into her cheek. Kirishima stood nearby, rifling through the cabinets for dishware. No, he took a call from the agency. Just can't stop working for a night. Must be he's afraid he'll fall behind me. Ishido hummed and continued to stuff her face. The smell of hot cheese grease filled the air, commingling with the clash of silverware. He eyed Jiro. She was frowning at her phone, typing furiously. Everything all right? Kyoka stopped, her face blank from the sudden disruption. She gave him a strange look. Bakugo pulled out his phone and rolled his eyes. Why yeah, I was just checking in with Momo. Things are looking really bad over there. Apparently, some assholes decided to take advantage of the lack of police. So now, there's a gang war going on. Thankfully, they've got some heavy hitters with them. Bakugo grunted as he started to scroll through a few articles on the nearby cases. His scowl only deepened the more he read. Deku's got a lot of explaining to do. Muttering, Deku paced around his office, wringing his gloved hands as he made his thousandth pass around his desk. While the room was bathed in the golden, dying light of the day, heavy shadows crept up on the walls. He managed to avoid Kachan for a few days which, thinking back, probably only made his life worse. Considering the numerous calls, text messages, and emails that he had been ignoring, the flowers slowly choking him were the less pressing, life-threatening issue. His eyes shifted to the stack of files sitting on his desk. He'd been too busy patrolling to address colder cases. Now, drowning in the papers made it hard to breathe. That are the flowers in his chest. Well before the outbreak began, he had been using himself as a case study, and alongside Hanahaki data gathered from other literature, the manila folders were bloated with piles of notes and photocopied articles. As the number of cases exploded, he had shared his research with the leading epidemiologists handling the pandemic. Izuku felt an insurmountable amount of responsibility for this outbreak. He hadn't given much thought to Dahlia since first encountering her in his third year at UA. Then, 5 weeks ago, she had evaporated herself before him. Deku paused and felt his shame wash over him. He could have stopped this long ago and didn't. How many people were infected because of his failure? How many would die? His thoughts flickered to his friends and the many sidekicks he employed. He thought of a pair of brown eyes and flushed cheeks. His lungs suddenly felt heavy, laden with bloom. Deku dropped to his knees, clutching at his chest as his body began to involuntarily clear his airway. Panic started to rise as he scrambled to his trash bin. His diaphragm undulated violently, pushing the ever-haunting sunflower petals from his Ma One for All activated involuntarily, the power of his quirk flowing through his veins. In his terror-ridden haze, a passing morbid idea suggested he break a finger to help bring himself back to reality. As soon as he decided to give it a shot, the sweet relief of fresh air suddenly breezing through him was more than enough to make him collapse. His face dropped into the slick pile of petals. He felt drained. His arms were limp, and his midsection was more akin to a worn-out rubber band than the mass of muscles he was used to. A sudden knock at his door alarmed Midoriya. He wanted to sit up but couldn't find the strength to move just yet. "Ah, sir. You've got visitors. Is now a good time to send them in?" "Damn it. Tosori can't see me like this. Hell, no one should see me like this." Izuku did his best to calm down, breathing in deeply and slowly, before responding. "And not, just yet. Gimme a minute, and I'll send for them." His voice cracked as he spoke. He winced at the sound but couldn't do anything about it after all. He had just puked his lungs out. Almost literally. Ooh. K. I'll let them know. There was a pause before Deku's sidekick spoke again. "Are you sure you're okay, sir? You do know who's visiting, right?" "Why yeah, I promise I'm fine. Give him some coffee and, actually, don't give Kachan any. He's probably on edge already." Deku tried to give a shaky laugh but only ended up coughing. He heard Tosori's feet begin to rush towards him. Midoriya called out with a bit more command over his voice. "Tosori, it's fine. Please tend to the guests." "Yes, sir," Tosori gave tersely. The door closed and Izuku found himself alone once again. He closed his eyes, sighing in relief at the brief reprieve he was given. Izuku decided to test just how blown out his muscles were. He tried sitting up and was surprised to find that he could almost move all the way to an upright position. That hopeful thought was struck down when he turned to look at the evidence behind him. He was sure it would just be the two fauna he usually had to sweep up, but today, there were purple lilac petals sprinkled in the pile. Izuku knelt down and scooped up a handful to carefully inspect the rare flora that had come up one by one. He picked at them, almost reverently, his face pulled down in exhaustion. How much longer can I keep this up? The door to his office blew open with a burst of noise and heat. Stomping feet and an indiscernible yell followed shortly after. Where the fuck are you, Deku? You got some guts keeping me and the old man waiting. Izuku held back a groan as he stood up, hunching over slightly to relieve his aching body. Bakugo stomped in with Toshinori Yagi in tow. Both looked unhappy to see him at that moment. All Might ambled forward, using a cane to help himself walk. Deku felt his palms become clammy as their eyes locked onto him. Deku, you fuck. What the hell's the big ID? Bakugo stopped mid-rage when Midoriya turned to look at him, hands full of petals. Deku gave him a sad grin with a slight shrug. Kacchan growled but didn't budge from the spot. All Might lowered himself into Izuku's chair with a heavy sigh, glaring at his successor with equal intensity to Katsuki's albeit more painful. A bloated silence fell upon them until All Might spoke up. Do you wanna explain that to me, Emboy, nodding to the petals that littered the carpet. Izuku quickly bent down to clear up the mess he made. A sharp rap to the back of his head made him cry out. He looked up, rubbing the sore spot on the crown of his head. Glaring down at him, All Might held his cane just above Izuku's nose. That's not what I said. Alright, so, what do you two know about Hanahaki? Other than you have it. Not a lot. It's been killing a lot of people, and I wanna know how you ain't dead yet, Kacchan demanded. Midoriya took in a deep gulp of air and started explaining. Okay, so I guess I better start at the beginning. Hanahaki is called the lover's disease. Basically, if you catch it, you'll start coughing up flowers whenever you think about your romantic interest. This is a mutagen that was thought to have died off after quirks appeared. So how are people getting it now? All Might asked. That's the interesting part. Well, not really interesting. This particular strain is quirk-based. Kacchan might not remember, but back in our third year, we had been brought in on a weird case. A string of deaths that plagued Yokohama. The victims all died by asphyxiation from flowers that bloomed in their lungs. It was so strange, so I dug up some old medical books to figure out what this was. I remember now, Dahlia something or other. Kacchan interjected. Izuku nodded in confirmation. Yup. Called herself the Red Dahlia. She made it her personal mission to make people confront their unspoken feelings, hence all the deaths. A grim disquiet filled the air as Izuku took a moment to drink some water. All Might and Bakugo were deep in thought, mulling over the information. Kacchan looked up and bore his red eyes on the pile of folders sitting on Deku's desk. Alright, so what the hell's up with those? At most, it's only been 5 weeks since you caught it. You're a nerd, but even you try to sleep every once in a while. Why yeah, I'm getting to that. I need to go over how the disease works so you can understand why people are falling to it. He waited a moment for them to refocus and he continued. Dahlia's quirk worked very similarly to the original illness. In both cases, your body would produce vines that line the inside of your lungs. Little buds start to grow when puberty kicks in and remain dormant until you find someone you really care about. Quote dot. I still don't understand. If it's a quirk-based disease, how is it still affecting people when she's dead? Great question, All Might. She had two other villains with her when she blew herself, Labrava and Vapor. Dahlia activated her power, used Labrava to enhance it and had Vapor destroy all three of them. Their bodies were reduced to molecules that carried Hanahaki through the air. We think that, thanks to Labrava's aid, Dahlia was able to create a more permanent strain of this sickness. Without a vaccine, people are faced with the few options of treatment available. Fuck, Kachan whistled. Deku and All Might hummed in agreement, sinking back into that uncomfortable hush from before. Izuku caught Bakugo's eye and squirmed under the scrutiny he was now under. So what the hell are people supposed to do? It's not like you can rip this shit out of your body. You can, surprisingly, Deku offered. The operation is twofold. First, you have to limit the hypothalamus from producing oxytocin to prevent accidental bloom during stage 2. Then, you actually remove the vines from the lungs, but it's super risky. Messing with the hypothalamus can leave you dead if you don't do it right, and of course, operating on your lungs is always hazardous. So what other options do people have, young Midoriya? Deku looked down at his fidgety hands. A blush crept up his neck as he fumbled with the words in his mouth. YUH can co-conference fess, he mumbled. All Might had to lean towards him, hand cupping an ear, to try and hear better. Bakugo hadn't missed what was said, however. He flew into a triad, berating Deku for his stupidity. All you have to do is that. So what? It's not that big a deal, jackass. You extras are so stupid. Kachan, don't be so callous. It's not just that you have to confess. If your love isn't reciprocated, your lungs bloom on the spot and you die. Izuku hardened his glare at Bakugo. All Might groaned and rubbed his face. I would laugh if people weren't dying. This seems like something out of a teenager's fantasy. All Might looked beyond Deku into the bruised atmosphere looming over the city skyline, looking for simple answers that just didn't exist. I know it's tough to swallow, but this is where we're at. As this progresses, the problem becomes more cyclical. Since so many people are terrified of dying to this, they're rushing to confess, which only gets them rejected, killing them. So how come you still have it? How aren't you dead, Deku? Izuku shifted uncomfortably under Bakugo's glare. You've been avoiding Uraraka, TCH, coward. Do you really think you're gonna die from this? I don't know, Kachan. I've lived with it for 3 years now, and I'm still here. I can keep going. Quote dot. Deku spoke out of anger. Bakugo's accusation got the better of him. All Might and Bakugo gaped at Midoriya, a guttural ache clawing out of their open mouths. Izuku turned his back on them, no longer willing to meet their eyes. When we chased down Dahlia 3 years ago, I got hit with her quirk. I didn't think it would do any damage. Later in the day, after we had arrested Dahlia, I saw her. She had been busy with another case, and she looked like she'd been in a scrap. The moment I tried to talk to her, I had to run off to throw up. Deku turned back to them, a somber look plastered on his face. He swallowed hard as he tried to drive the image of Ochako from his mind. We were both so close to taking the next steps towards our goals. I couldn't screw that up for her, and I had a responsibility to one for all. I couldn't risk letting all for one winning this war by dying for some stupid crush. Only it wasn't just a goddamn crush, was it? Bakugo countered, in case you forgot, I was with you the whole time. Are you really gonna stand there and tell me it was just you being a kid? TCH. It's true, young Midoriya. I watched something in you flourish over time. Have you really been shying away and using one for all as an excuse? What kind of life is that? Izuku shook his head, frustration pushing through his furrowed brow. I can't believe I'm hearing this from you too. How many times did you tell me to get my act together for this? Quote dot. Don't pin this on us, you decided what to do all on your own. And what's worse, do you know what kind of bullshit you put Uraraka through? She deserves better than you gave. Deku pressed his lips in a brave attempt to keep his mouth shut. Kachan was right. Izuku had done all he could to avoid being alone with Ochako, else he'd risk accidentally confessing. He couldn't put that on her. Bakugo stepped up to Midoriya and punched him in the shoulder, growling with as much menace as he could muster. You need to take care of this, now Deku. If you're the face the public is looking to for hope, you can't this disease cripple you. Izuku ventured a peek at Kachan and was met with a firm, even expression. There was no doubt in Katuki's eyes, only the regular confidence that was present when he spoke about his own greatness. Deku felt tears well up in his eyes and whimpered out before doubling over to let loose more flowers that had immediately blossomed. Over the sound of his own retching, Midoriya could hear the other two fussing over him as they waited for the danger to pass. Soon enough, Deku was able to breathe again, though it came in desperate gasps. Bakugo, in all his tactfulness, was the first to question what just happened. Okay, so you two aren't going to like this answer, but it isn't just an Uraraka problem that I've got. This involves you two also. The fuck does that mean? Kachan spat. Izuku sighed as he stood up to gaze into the sunset. Twilight was falling upon the world with haste, a bluish tint gracing the surfaces of buildings and cars like spilled paint. He had been dreading this. While Midoriya knew he had to cross this bridge, he felt no more prepared to take this leap. When All Might gave me one for all, it changed me genetically. I was capable of holding more than one quirk at a time. That change also left me open to having different types of Hanahaki. That's impossible, All Might breathed. How can you have more than one type of this illness? Easy. There's more than one type of love, All Might. Might. He looked at them both carefully as if they might fade away before him if he said the wrong thing. According to a few ancient Greek philosophers, there are 8 kinds of love. Just like having multiple quirks, it's extremely rare to have different forms of Hanahaki, but it's been documented to happen. That's what's happened to me. All Might and Bakugo fell silent, contemplating the implications of what he had just said. Deku turned back to watch the sky darken. He closed his eyes and prayed for enough strength to face whatever came next. Bakugo spoke up after several long moments had passed. All right, how the hell does this involve us, Deku? A melancholy smile played at Izuku's lips when he faced the other two once more. They both looked apprehensive, their bodies wound up for some unknown surprise coming their way. This may come as a shock, but I love you, Kachan. I love you too, All Might. All Might and Bakugo thankfully kept their mouths clamped shut. Izuku smiled a little as he waited for a response. His lungs expanded and grew heavy while he stood patiently for a response. The ever-haunting, familiar sensation of flora blooming came back to him. His airway was blocked and he fought back to clutch at his throat. He must have tipped All Might off as his predecessor spoke up. You know that I love you too, young Midoriya. I wouldn't have entrusted my quirk to you if you were not worthy. I've also been blessed to have watched you grow into the fine man you are today. I only want you to be happy, Izuku. You deserve that much. All Might's eyes sprung a leak as he stood up, shakily using his cane to get on his feet. He crossed the short length to Deku and embraced the young man. Look at this. You've given me a bad habit, young Midoriya. Now I'm crying. They held one another and wept quietly. Izuku was embarrassed to admit it, but he had grown to see All Might as a second father. Wilting petals escaped his more vacant lungs in between his tears. Somewhere, beyond All Might's scrawny frame, Bakugo scoffed at the sappy display in front of him. Midoriya peeled himself away from All Might to look at Kacchan. Katsuki crossed his arms and turned to glare off into the distance with a huff. Kacchan. Fuck, you're gonna make me say it, aren't ya? Bakugo grunted as he pulled at the skin around his eyes. I mean, come on, Deku. You think I would have taken a rival who I didn't believe stood a chance at winning? I shouldn't have to tell you, you should already know. I love you too, idiot. Bakugo rambled on, unable to stop himself. He sniffled and shed a few tears while he rambled on. His voice wavered, almost breaking from the strain of holding everything back. Everyone put me on a pedestal, and I knew I'd be at the top with no one looking down on me. You didn't see me as that icon. And I thought that meant you were looking down on me, but really, all you ever wanted was to be my friend. Time and time again, you proved how far you'd go to get what you wanted. I hate to say it, but that determination made you my hero. Deku wailed as pulled Bakugo into a tight hug. Kacchan growled and did his best to wriggle out of Midoriya's death grip. Toshinori chuckled from beyond the two young heroes. They took a brief moment from their struggle to watch him wipe his eyes. You two really are idiots sometimes. Bakugo broke free from Deku's arms and began arguing with All Might. Izuku watched them with a warm smile on his face. He heaved a little, closing off his mouth with a fist. Spitting out into his open palm, Deku looked at the shriveled, dried dandelion and lilac petals. He breathed in deeply. The three of them chattered away the next half hour, their faces considerably more relaxed now. All Might checked his watch and started in alarm. Bakugo helped him up, though Toshinori insisted that he could stand on his own. They exchanged a few prolonged goodbyes punctuated with several warnings to talk to Uraraka tonight, and soon enough, Deku was alone in his office. He flopped into his chair, rubbing his face with a long sigh. With his feet propped up on his desk, Deku sat quietly as he stared out into the night sky and thought about his next step. A nervous smile lit his face. Ochako's face popped into his mind, and for once, he wasn't afraid to think of the warm features he had fallen for. Chapter 2. Barely breathing. Deku pulled out his phone, scrolling until he found Uraraka's contact file. With shaking hands, he closed his phone. Izuku glanced at his reflection. Why am I so worried? It's only Uraraka. We've talked plenty of times on the phone before. There's nothing to be afraid of except possibly dying. And that she might hate me. Midoriya looked down at his phone sadly. He scrolled through it again, scrutinizing his call and text message log. Sure enough, his worst fears were confirmed. In an effort to keep himself alive, he had been avoiding her more and more. If he was being fully honest with himself, it really hurt. Not only was she his best friend, but she was also the person he was madly in love with. Not seeing her as often when he had gotten so used to her being around was almost like being asked to hold his breath. Literally. With a determined expression fixed on his brow, he tapped on his phone several times and called Ochako's agency. He held the phone and fidgeted in place as he waited for someone to pick up. Luckily for him, Mina was working the night shift and answered. Rainy day rescue, this is Pinky. What's your emergency? Deku frowned. Even if it was on the phone, she always managed to put a smile on Midoriya's face. Today, there was a significant dour tone in her normally sing-song cadence. Something was wrong and a creeping fear crawled up his throat. Hey, Ishido. Long time no see. How are you? Midori, what do you want? Mina asked with a hard edge in her words. Deku gulped and explained that he wanted to see when Uraraka would be available for lunch. Ishido didn't answer right away. His frown deepened the longer he waited, but she responded in a hushed tone after a moment. She's not gonna be in, Mido. Ocha caught that bug that everyone's been getting while on patrol. She tried coming in today, but we sent her to a hospital. I haven't heard back from her yet. What hospital? Izuku demanded. She gave him the few details she had, Deku writing it down in a frenzy. Panic quickened his heartbeat, and he felt one for all course through his veins once again. In a flash, Izuku had donned the remaining pieces of his costume and ran out of his office window, blazing a trail of green lightning as he sped off into the night. She was surrounded by a wall of darkness. The only thing flitting into her mind were the sounds around her and the few sensations that grabbed at her mind. Stiff plastic bands pressed into her face as they wrapped around her head to ensure that the mouth covering did not move. Various beeps and muffled, whirring fans on her left sounded off constantly. The air around her was stale with a sterile taste. All things considered, it could have been worse. She had definitely survived more harrowing situations before. This was just one more challenge. Right. Just one more obstacle. I'm screwed. It shouldn't have been so bad when she walked into the hospital. She was expecting a quick visit, even if she had to wait for a bit. Of course, that's not what happened. The moment she entered the urgent care doorway, Uraraka was greeted by a lobby filled with sick people in chairs, nurses frantically running around, and a literal rainbow of petals covering the tiled floor. She was stunned in place as the sounds of vomiting, groans, and the panicked whispers played around her like a macabre concerto. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason to who and how ill patients were. Before she could think to stop herself, Uraraka spoke to a nearby nurse and asked for a situation update. Uraraka was met with an incredulous explanation before the nurse recognized her as a pro-hero. It was grim for sure. The facility they were standing in was the last area to have any capacity. All other hospitals were already full with the sick and dying. There wasn't much Ochako could do except be present for the patients as they waited to be called. So, she sat with them to try and assuage their fears. Soon enough, she found that an hour and a half had passed. Things were going smoothly until she was met with a young teen wearing an evergreen jacket. The girl shook in her seat, her lap filled with glistening red tulip petals. Uraraka knelt in front of her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Fear cut across the young girl's face, her eyes darting about as Ochako tried to calm her down. After some coaxing, the girl revealed that her name was Yuiro Sakai. This was her first year in high school, and she was going there with her childhood friend. Uraraka did her best to change the subject when Yuiro's friend came up, but it wasn't working. Apparently, this person was everywhere. Their lives had become so intertwined that distancing herself was not an option. I'm just so scared, Sakai whispered. I want them to know, but I don't want to die. You're strong, Yuiro, I can tell. You'll live long enough to make this person know how much you care about them. Promise? Sakai asked, desperation flooding her eyes. Ochako gave her a firm nod. You just gotta face this head on with a smile on your face, like your favorite hero. Let me guess, you're a big Ground Zero fan. No, actually it's Deku. Zero fan. No, actually it's Deku. I just love how he has the warmest smile no matter what. He's the best hero out there. Sakai tugged her jacket, unfurling the wrinkles so that Uraraka could get a better look. Ochako hadn't noticed the dark, blocky panels that ran vertically parallel or the cream shoulder pads. It was a jacket that she herself owned. The effect was instant. Uraraka clamped her mouth shut, though her breathing was very labored. A bitter, minty taste flooded her tongue, the soft leaves crowding rudely behind her teeth. After years of pushing her nausea tolerance through training her quirk, Ochako had become quite adept at holding back any bile that would attempt escape. Uraraka was spared responding as Sakai was ushered away by a passing nurse. The two gave each other a brave wave goodbye, and Ochako waited until the girl was out of sight to expel the contents of her mouth. She gasped for air, falling on all fours as more flowers burst out from her lungs and onto the floor. A few pained tears clung to her lashes, obscuring her vision as she continued to fight for air. Uraraka dug her nails into the flesh of her palms, gritting against the undulations of her diaphragm. She had been doing so well for so long. Why should now be any different? She knew, of course, the answer flowing out of her mouth in an instant. Ochako collapsed and heaved with fresh tears streaming out of her eyes. For some time, it was just her shrouded thoughts and the damnable flowers keeping her company. Deku's face swirled around her mind. His bright smile and warm voice intoxicating, comforting and torturing her all at once. She didn't know how long she had been at it before several hands lifted her off the ground and placed her on a stretcher. Voices around her started shouting orders. She fought hard to stay present, to know what they were doing, but without a refreshing breath to keep awake, Ochako could only succumb to the darkness that overtook her. Uraraka awoke and tried to open her eyes. They remained stubbornly closed, and she tried to frown. That didn't work either. Her muscles stayed impassive, heavy with the lack of responsiveness to her commands. Ochako attempted to stave off the panic by breathing deeply but found she lacked control on that end as well. It was then that she felt the straps containing her to a bed, tubes uncomfortably stuck down her throat, and steady noise of beeps and whirs of a nearby machine. They must have induced me into a coma. I'm stuck. She stayed alone in the dark, only her thoughts occupying her mind. Her parents, her agency, her goals all flooded through her. Ochako wasn't one for regrets, but there was a repeating phrase that drummed out, hammering at her with guilt. I should have told him. If she could weep, she would have shed tears for all of her unfinished business. Instead, she waited in that dark, listening for anything that might distract her. Some more time passed when an unearthly wail broke the stillness. A woman was sobbing and screaming, There was the sound of scuffling bodies, more voices shouting for someone to calm down. My baby. My Yuiro. My baby girl. No. Mrs. Sakai, please calm down. Calm down. My child is gone. My Yuiro is dead, and it's your fault. Ochako couldn't fidget or scream out. The only thing she could do was lament silently. She remembered the hopeful smile on the girl's lips as she waved goodbye. Uraraka had promised her that she would survive this. What could have happened to cut her life so short? She didn't have to wait long for an answer. The emptied hall was soon occupied by a couple of orderlies pushing something on squeaky wheels. They were muttering to each other rather loudly, not a care in the world for how disrespectful they were being. Just had a bit of bad luck. The moment the doc told her what options she had, she must have chosen to confess. And then she croaked. I mean, yeah, look at her. She didn't have a chance. I overheard the nurses talking. Apparently, it was some childhood crush. Poor kid. Uraraka's racing mind froze. Yuiro must have told her friend how she felt. The moment she had fallen ill, Ochako looked for alternative ways to treat Hanahaki with no success. If she was on patrol, at the office, or at home, any spare moment was spent researching what little information was out there. Uraraka was in constant disbelief at the position she found herself in. After years of admiring and cheering on Izuku, she thought she would have time later to pursue something. That was the plan. Graduate, become a pro, get her parents settled and approach Deku if he was still single. She had a timeline and everything. Now, her only hope of a full recovery hinged on confessing to Deku, which she couldn't even do now. To make things worse, Uraraka was certain that he didn't feel the same way she did. How long had she tried reaching out to him with Deku to evade any invitations or to stand her up? Sure, he had good excuses, but it didn't hurt any less. She was as good as dead. She wanted to cry so badly, but her paralysis prevented any relief from coming. Ochako lay in her misery, waiting for a nurse to come check on her or something to wake her up. She hated being still when there was work to do. She could have at least made an effort to fight this thing, even if it meant she would die. Uraraka was so preoccupied with her thoughts that she barely noticed the arrival of something large sitting next to her bed. Her tumultuous mulling ended abruptly when this new something or someone grabbed her hand and squeezed. Her heart stuttered against her rib cage, and for once she was glad of the apparatus dictating her breathing. A shaken, warm voice that she had grown to love spoke quietly. Ochako. I'm so sorry. I did this to you. Deku pulled her hand up and pressed his lips to cold skin. He continued speaking, stemming any thoughts from forming. I can't stand seeing you like this. You're always so full of life and just ready to go at the drop of hat. You've inspired so many people and you're so close to making your dream real. You have your own hero agency. How cool is that? How cool are you? His voice broke and he stopped speaking. Deku hiccuped and clung to her hand. She could feel Izuku's head shuddering on her knuckles. At that moment all she wanted was to wake up and cup his face, to look into those very likely watery green eyes, to tell him it would be alright. I should have stopped this a long time ago. You don't know how important you are to me, Ochako. I wouldn't be half the hero I am without you. I wouldn't be alive if not for you. Watching you grow strong and reach your goals has just been amazing. Quote dot. I screwed up. I shouldn't have pushed you away. I should have told you why I was being so distant. Uraraka, you deserve so much better than I gave. But I promise, if we make it out of this, I will make it up to you. I'll give you every part of me, 100%. And you will survive this. Do you know why? She found it hard to breathe suddenly. Her body hitched violently, pulling herself up against the straps. Deku made a strangled yell, calling for help. Ochako continued shaking, jumping uncontrollably as her lungs struggled to take in air. A clogged, suctioning noise grew louder. Pain erupted in her mind as fought for a breath. Deku had taken her hand and stroked her forehead, pleading with her in a whisper. Ochako, please. I need you. Please stay with me. I love you. I'm sorry I kept you waiting, but I love you, RK. Uraraka struggled uselessly against her unresponsive body. She could hear Deku retch, but beyond that she was only aware of the immense pain she was in. The lack of oxygen had begun to take its toll on her strength. Before the world vanished, Ochako's last thought was that she and Deku could at least meet up in the next life to try this again. Uraraka stirred in a haze, her mind foggy and churning slowly. Her senses were dulled. She could make out some smells and sensations through her muddied nerves. A few voices came through, muffled and warbled as if she were underwater. She thought she recognized them, but couldn't be sure as her eyes fluttered open. Must take measures to not alarm her. We cannot risk anything. But, come on man, Midoriya saved her, right? That's what the nurses said. He confessed. Yeah, Iida. Midori gave her a chance. While I am proud of Midoriya for finally stepping up, we don't know if Uraraka is still ill. We simply don't have enough information. We must agree to not say anything when she wakes up. Agreed. Who? Deku. The voices around her squeaked and squealed in terror. As her sight came into focus, she found herself looking at the bleary faces of Iida, Ishido, and Kirishima. Mina and Eijiro were still in their costumes. Their faces sagged, with deep bruised skin under their eyes. Iida looked more put together, wearing a crisp suit that did nothing to hide his own beleaguered features. The three of them approached Uraraka with trepidation shaking in their shoulders. She swiveled her head to look at each of them, her mind still trying to clear up. Where am I? She asked. Her voice croaked, her vocal cords shaking off the rust of underuse. Mina pulled her into a hug, sobbing a little. Ochako did her best to wrap her arms around Ishido, though it took more effort than she would care to admit. You scared me, Ocha, Mina cried, her voice buried in Uraraka's hospital gown. The nurses told us you fell apart not too long after you got here. They had to put you under an O. I almost lost you. Mina, hun, she's fine. See, Uraraka's giving you a thumbs up. Kirishima chimed. Ochako looked at Red Riot, the tears and wavering stoic smile betraying the confidence in his voice. Iida adjusted his glasses as he stepped closer. I'm afraid that's not a thumb, Kirishima. Uraraka put her hand back on Ishido's shoulder, patting her partner for some breathing space. Mina rubbed at her eyes as she stepped away. A few sniffles from her guests sounded, a sad trio of trombones blowing out of sync. Uraraka was propped up with the help of Kirishima. Iida had alerted a passing nurse of her condition and cleared the way for the medical attendee to examine Ochako. A few pokes and prods, loads of questions, and a breathing test gave the nurse all they needed. Well, you gave us a scare there, Uravati. I'll get the doctor to come in and check up on you. You'll likely be cleared to go home in about a day. Glad you pulled through. The nurse left them all, giving Uraraka a moment to collect herself. With the brain fog clearing up more by the second, her mind quickly turned to the one person she needed to speak to. Where's Deku? She didn't like the look her friends exchanged amongst themselves. A few seconds of quiet did nothing to dispel the frown growing on her face. Iida took it upon himself to address her, adjusting his glasses so that they could see each other clearly. Uraraka, I think it would be best if you rested up. You've been through quite an ordeal. It's been 3 days since you were admitted. 3 days. Iida nodded vigorously, his face set in a solemn grimace. Indeed, I believe I speak for us all when I say you need to focus on recovering. Midoriya would want that. But you still haven't told me where he is. She glared at them all, doing her best to gild any information from them. Mina's eyes welled up again and she turned away. Kirishima escorted Ishido out of the room, claiming they were going to get Ochako some food and water. Iida slumped into the vacant seat next to her bed. He held his face in his hands, glasses raised askew as he groaned into his palms. Iida, where is Deku? Please, Uraraka, you must recover. No, tell me where he is or I'll get out of this bed and look for him myself. They glared at each other evenly for several moments. Tenya was leaning forward, his hands steepled under nose. Ochako caught the glazed sheen in his eyes. It was the same one he had used often when they were in school, a tell that showed he was in deep thought. Iida took a breath and dove into an explanation. After you were admitted, Midoriya came to visit you. Apparently you were conscious enough to hear him confess how he felt about you. That is what saved your life. Did he know you loved him? Love, Ochako corrected, I love him. Not loved. And no. How could he know that he's the one I needed to talk to? Iida gave her a shrug. I'm uncertain. All I do know is that immediately after, he had an attack of his own. What? He has it too. Has had it, according to Bakugo. The two had a conversation the day you were admitted. He's had it for, well, for long enough that he should have talked to you before any of this happened. Uraraka gave him a stern look. Anyway, he had an attack of his own. Being unable to respond to you, Midoriya had to be induced as well. He is here in this wing, but that's all I can give you, I'm afraid. Uraraka argued with Iida for several minutes, shouting as loud as she could to get him to budge. Tenya stood up with a grunt and shook his head. Eventually, the doctor came in to examine Okako. Iida took this as an out, leaving the room with his jaw set in grim determination. She huffed, but it was no use. She was still hooked up to wires and IV drips. It's not like she could get away. The thought struck her as she watched her doctor leave. She eyed the needles and wondered how much it would hurt to take them out. Screw it, Deku was somewhere nearby and she was going to see him, recovery be damned. Ochako began ripping off bandages and taking out the IVs from her veins. The monitors began to cry out in alarm, her vitals no longer keeping them calm. She glared at the machines as she swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her muscles felt gelatinous as she stood up, wobbling as she padded towards the doorway. She took a look to her right and turned to face a pair of red eyes glaring past spiked blonde bangs. B. Bakugo. The fuck are you doing, round face? Ochako opened and closed her mouth to form an answer, but none came. Katsuki's scowl deepened as he looked up. She followed his gaze and swore under her breath. A small platoon of nurses were gathering at center station, their heads switching from looking in her direction to the monitors at the desk. A gruff hand pulled her arm, draping it over a knotted set of shoulders. Fuck this. Come on, Uraraka. Deku's waiting. The two sneaked away as quickly and silently as possible. Eventually, Bakugo got fed up with their pace and started carrying her, much to her protest. He cut her arguing short with a side eye and kept moving. When they cleared a corner and stayed out of sight, Katsuki put her down. He took off his jacket, shoving it into her hands. She gave him a curious look, not knowing what to do with it. Cover your ass up, don't think you wanna see that shitty nerd in only your skinnies.